Morning. How is everyone today? Right, the Lord blessed us with a warm day before another chill. It's a gift. As Father said, my name is Father Steve Borello. I'm the Director of Vocations for the Diocese of Joliet. It's my joy to be the Vocation Director. And it's my responsibility to help young men and young women to respond to God's call in their life. First, to know the freedom that God has for them, and then second, to invite them in that freedom to follow after the Lord. I want to just share two analogies that I like to use when it comes to vocation, because St. Paul really in his letter to the Philippians does a wonderful job of laying out what all of us are called to when he says, and really I hope this is the prayer of every parent for their child, and this is my prayer, that your love may increase ever more and more in the knowledge and every kind of perception, to discern what is of value, so that you may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, for the glory and praise of God. I remember when I was 26 years old, my father finally told me that he prayed. I never knew that my father prayed at all, actually. We went to Mass every Sunday. We said grace at meals, but apart from that, I didn't know that he was a man of prayer. But we were at 26, I was going back to seminary, and I said to my dad, Dad, do you ever pray? And my dad looked at me and goes, well, yeah, all the time. And I asked my dad, well, what do you pray for? And he goes, well, I've only ever prayed for one thing. On the day that I found out that your mother was pregnant with you, I began asking Jesus, and this is the only prayer I've said since then, is that you and your sisters would be happy with God in this life and in the next. That is the sole prayer I have prayed. So I remember when I was telling my dad in college that I wanted to be a priest, my father's words to me were, well, if it's what's going to make you happy. And I didn't realize then, because I didn't know that was his prayer, but that was the fundamental thing that he wanted for my sisters and I, that we would know the authentic joy of living in a relationship with Jesus, and that we would be with him forever in this life and in the next. So back to the analogies. There's two that I like to use because the call, first and foremost, is to be in relationship with Jesus. So the first is, I like to think of like a young woman who is dating or coming into this friendship with Jesus. And as they become better and better friends, at a certain point, Jesus is going to ask the young woman, can I be at the very center of your heart? Can I take the place of everything else and be that very center of your heart? And hopefully the young woman's going to say yes, because who wouldn't want Jesus at the center of their heart, right? But once they say yes, that's not their vocation. That's the call to live our baptism. That's the call to live out the freedom of this gift that we have in baptism, which I see we have two babies who are going to get baptized today, which is awesome, because that's what the Lord wants. He wants us to live in this freedom and to make a choice and election of our own. And as they grow in this freedom and this gift and this relationship, at a certain point then the Lord will ask this question, can I keep your heart for myself and give you my heart? Right? That is the celibate, the religious vocation, or the consecrated virgin. Or Jesus will say, can I share your heart with another, which is the married life? Right? That's the beautiful thing about marriage, right, is that husbands and wives are meant to share their hearts. Jesus is the one who's meant to bear it. It takes a lot of stress off of us men, I tell you that much, because we can't carry our spouse's heart. And likewise, ladies, you can't carry your husband's heart. Only Jesus can. And it's a beautiful thing because it's in that space of Jesus' invitation that you and I are being invited to follow him. The other analogy I like is that you have the analogy of a father and a son working in a field together, doing something together, and Jesus is there with them working in the field because Jesus experiences and does everything that we ourselves do, except for sin. And at a certain point, because the young man sees that Jesus is faithful and trustworthy and knows what he is about, his heart is open for Jesus to ask him, will you pledge your life to my Father in heaven and to his kingdom, and we will pledge ours to you. And hopefully that young man says yes. And then Jesus begins to take the young man throughout the kingdom and show him the different ways that one can give back to the kingdom. And for some, you have who will be knights and squires and pages and archers and armorers, and they fight against the evil that seeks to destroy the families and the kingdom. Right? Those individuals would be called to the life of celibacy. They laid down their lives for the sake of all the people of the kingdom. And then you have those who end up taking up the role of being farmers and doctors and nurses and blacksmiths and teachers. And they build up the kingdom from within with families. Right? So these are the two analogies I like to use to speak of vocation. But notice that first and foremost, it's about relationship with Jesus. So when I was in second grade, I remember this day very clearly. Father Sebahar was walking down the aisle in his green chasuble, and I thought to myself, self, I would look good in green. And I didn't realize that that was the very beginning, that first inclination that maybe I was called to the priesthood. So in fourth grade, I began to pray every morning. We had a crucifix in my room, and I would kneel before every morning. My parents didn't know about this. Because it's one of those things you do in private, right? So I would kneel every morning before this crucifix and I would pray to Jesus and ask Jesus for whatever a fourth grader asks. And then when we would go to RE, I would take my sisters who were younger and have them kneel next to me. We'd pray in front of Jesus in the tabernacle, right? Because that's what a good older brother does, right? Until I found out that we were going to move. Anybody here ever move? Right? Like we all know what that's like. And so I told Jesus, I said, Jesus, you're God, you're all powerful, you love me. Don't let my parents move. We moved. So what does that do to a fourth grader's heart? Right? Well, God's not all powerful. God doesn't really love me because God didn't do what I wanted him to do. So after that happened, I clearly remember this distinction, because then in fifth grade and then going into junior high and into high school, I began to push against going to church. I began to say I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to go there because I didn't think God was who God said he was. And so I threw myself into the sciences. I took every single science course high school offered. And then I went to university. I went to the University of Illinois. I studied chemical engineering and advanced specialized chemistry, right? I had a pocket protector, and I would push my glasses up all the time. I loved it, but what I loved about it was because what I didn't realize I was seeking an answer to why is there something rather than nothing, right? Because if God isn't trustworthy, I have to have something else to root my life in. But I also threw myself into the life of college because I figured, what is the real consequence if God isn't actually who God says he is? So I come home at Christmas, and it's the first time home at Christmas, and I'm there sitting there at Christmas Mass, miserable, right? Because when you're unhappy, you're really unhappy, and you don't realize you're miserable until you're surrounded by happy people. Have you ever had that experience? Right? I'm just like, can I punch you all in the face? That's where my heart was. And I was just sitting there, and this thought came to mind, well, it's because you don't go to church, which I thought was ridiculous. So next semester, I'm in lab, and all of a sudden, I have this epiphany. I could do an experiment, because that's what chemists do. We could go to Mass a week, and skip a week, and go 2 weeks, and skip 2 weeks, and go 3 weeks, and skip 3 weeks, and go 4 weeks, and I'll see that nothing is different about my life. It wasn't true. When I went to Mass, my grades got better. It took me less time on my tests. My friendships were better. Life was just overall more uplifted, and I just felt better about myself. Well, that stunk. But I didn't realize it was about Jesus, right? So next year, I'm in sophomore year. Anybody take organic chemistry? Oh, right, but you all know, I heard the groaning underneath. Right? So organic chemistry is that class that if you don't do well in, you have to change your major in college. That's how that works. And so here I am, desperate to improve my grade in organic chemistry. And so I said, if going to Mass once a week is good, what's better? Twice. Right? And sure enough, I ended the semester with an A in organic chemistry. Right? But it wasn't because I believed in Jesus. It wasn't because I knew he was present in the altar. It was just simply pragmatic. Until the end of my sophomore year. It was the third week of Easter, Friday. I'm sitting there at Mass, and I'm thinking about something. I'm pretty sure it was some engineering problem that I had. But then all of a sudden at the elevation, right, I see the crucifix, I see the host, I see the priest, and all of a sudden I have this epiphany that that's not a symbol. It's not a sign. Because if God is who God says he is, then that has to be what God says it is, which is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. And I knew in that moment, without any hesitation, that that is God. And as a sophomore, I panicked. And I said, we're going to wait till junior year to figure this out. So junior year comes, and I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to do really anything when it comes to the faith. I can say grace. That's about the extent of it. And I'm serving now because I want to keep going to Mass twice a week, and there just so happens to be this very cute sacristan who's joining a discernment group. I don't know what a discernment group is, but there's a cute sacristan joining it. So I joined the discernment group. And in the discernment group, I'm learning how to pray. I'm growing in friendship with Jesus. All of a sudden, I'm being taught all these things, and I'm in spiritual direction. And my director goes, Stephen, why don't you trust Jesus? What happened in your story? And I'm reminded of that time when I was in 4th grade. I said, well, because Jesus isn't trustworthy. Like the words just shot out of my mouth. And I said, when I was in 4th grade, and I told him the story, and he looked at me and he goes, Stephen, Jesus wanted to be with that 4th grade boy who was hurt because he moved. Jesus wanted to be with you so that you wouldn't be alone in the move. Jesus, because God gave us free will, can't control what other people are going to do to you. But the Father sent his Son into the world so that you would never be alone no matter what happened. And it was an epiphany moment where I realized it's like, I have been pushing God away for the last decade of my life when he wanted to draw close to me because of the hurt I experienced. Now, I think this may be true in a lot of our lives where we've experienced hurt and we've blamed God for the hurt rather than maybe acknowledging that there were other people that were involved. And I just want to invite you, if that might be your story, to please reconsider and give Jesus the chance to meet you in that place of pain. So as I let the Lord meet me there was a great freedom in my life to say, okay, Lord, I don't know what you want for my life, but help me to trust you. So at the end of my junior year, we're at our formal dance, and I'm with my girlfriend, and we're dancing. And while we're dancing, I start asking Jesus if he wants me to go to seminary. Don't do that. It's a real bad idea. And my girlfriend goes, who are you looking at behind me? I'm like, nobody. There's nobody there. And she's like, well, that's good because I'm here. So we go back to dancing. And I say, Jesus, do you want me to go to seminary? And Jesus said, yes. And I said, Jesus, do I have to go? And Jesus said, no, but I would like you to. And so in that moment, I was faced with this beautiful opportunity to choose to trust God, to trust him with my present, my past, and my future. And it was a moment of grace in which I said yes. And as soon as I said yes, she looked me in the eyes and she said, you know your vocation, don't you? We broke up that day, but the beauty of the story is about 10 years later, I was the priest who celebrated her wedding, which is really just a beautiful gift to God to me. But I share this story because it was all about the Lord inviting me into relationship first with his Son, to see that his Son is trustworthy, and that from that place of trustworthiness, being able to say yes to this invitation to follow him. And it's the same for every young woman and every young man. right? Whether it's in terms of them finding their spouse or finding their vocation. If we trust that Jesus is who he says he is and walk with him in that journey of our lives, he will bring us to where we need to be. And he will bring others to meet us in that place. But again, we have to remember that free will that our neighbors have. And so I'm here to ask of you a couple of things. One, to please pray. To please pray as parents that your hearts would be open, like my father's was, to seek the joy and happiness of your children, no matter where that vocation leads them, right? That your heart would be open to let your son become a priest, your daughter become a religious. Because if you want them to be happy, the happiest place they're going to be, or joyful, is in the house of the Lord, right? Whether that would be in marriage or in priesthood or religious life. The second thing I'm here to do is I'm here to ask you to invite your son or daughter. If you think your son is prime marriage material, which I hope you would invite your son to consider the priesthood. Because you deserve priests who would be exceptional husbands and fathers to your grandchildren to minister to you in a congregation, right? We don't need any priest who wouldn't want to love children, who wouldn't want to love us, right, as their children. Right? And the same thing with daughters. If you have daughters who you think would be exceptional mothers and wives, I want to invite you please to ask them, have you ever considered asking Jesus if he might be calling you to religious life? Because we want sisters of the same kind of caliber that we would want as wives. Because I think sometimes we forget, right, that priests could equally be wonderful fathers and husbands. And the same thing with sisters. And the third thing I'm here to ask of you is to invite any young men or young women that you know. We have 3 events for young adults coming up, especially focused on vocation, right, and discerning their vocation, that relationship with Jesus. We have a Men and Women Seeking Holiness Day over Christmas break. So if your kids are coming home over Christmas break from college or they're going to visit in town, feel free to invite them. It'll be in the bulletin next weekend or the weekend after. And then we also have something called the Jubilee Year for young adults, which will take place in Rome. And so we're bringing young adults from the diocese. We have 20 signed up so far. We have space for 20 more to come and spend this Jubilee pilgrimage in the eternal city of Rome to help grow in our own relationship with the universal church, with Jesus. And at the end of it, there's the canonization of Pier Giorgio Frassati, which to culminate this experience. My brothers and sisters, Jesus desires to make the hills and the mountains low and the winding roads straight and to fill in the valleys. He desires to make the path as smooth as possible for each one of us to respond to our vocation. And he does that by being with us in the loss and the difficulties and the struggles of life. Please let him be there and give him that permission so that when you receive him in this Eucharist today, say, Lord, help me let you be at the center of my heart so that wherever you are, I am, and that I would be with you now and forever. Thank you for your support of our seminarians especially. Thank you for the young men that you have given to us from your parish, right? Father Jim Olofsson, as well as Josh Solars, who's in formation now, as well as many others. And thank you for your yes to God, for your love of Jesus. And may you have a most blessed Advent and a very Merry Christmas.